Hi, welcome back to After Hours Restorations. As you can see, we have our Charger back from the body shop and we're getting ready to begin our assembly process. Sean and his team at Superior Craftsman did an excellent job bringing our Charger back to life. Due to these stampings and all of these body lines, I feel that this is one of the most difficult cars to restore. And in all my years of restoring classic muscle cars, I've never seen a body as straight as this one. Back in 1966, these cars never left the factory looking as good as we can make them look now. Doug, you're a lot older than me. How do you remember these cars looking back
I
then?
am. Well, back in my day, when you seen a car like this, it was usually cranked up in the back with air shocks, and we were cruising grass shit and having a good old time. We weren't worried about restoring. We were just worried about how we could tear it up.
Well, now we're picking up the pieces and putting them back together.
Yes, we are. Oh, well, when the paint job on this car really came out good. I mean, took some time, but this thing looks awesome.
Back in the day, they didn't have the technology that they have today. The cars left the factory with the enamel paint job. It wasn't wet sanded or buffed. It had a lot of orange peel in it, and it didn't have no depth.
Not like this one.
Right. So it hit a lot of imperfections. And now with the base clear systems available today, with the addition of wet sanding and buffing these cars, it magnifies the body lines and you can't hide any imperfections. You know, Sean mentioned he had approximately 1,500 man hours into this car from beginning to end.
I bet you wish you'd get that out of me.
You ain't kidding.
Well, are we gonna put this thing together or what?
Yeah, let's lift it up and scoot the engine underneath. Since we specialize in OE style restorations, we always try to duplicate factory processes as much as possible. The factory suspended the bodies from a conveyor and would lower it down onto the assembly line where the complete drivetrain was correctly positioned. Since we don't have the capabilities to lift the complete body up, we fabricated this bracket which will allow us to pick the front end up high enough so the engine will clear the frame rails as we roll it underneath. So now we're getting ready to push the engine under the body, and it's always been a tradition around here for the last 5 years that my helper, my son Keegan, helps me push the engine under the car. You ready, big man? All right, let's push. Push hard. Thank you, sir. Since we're only picking up the front of the car's on an angle. The back is lower than the front, and our engine is level. So we have to remove blocks from the transmission tail shaft to angle the transmission the same way the car is angled. So we purchase all new fasteners for our restorations, and we use OE style fasteners, and AMK Products sells real nice body chassis kits with all of the OE style fasteners that you would need. So now we have our K-member secured with all 4 fasteners, and Doug is under the car working on installing the transmission cross member. Then the whole engine will be completely secured in the car. Installing the engine requires a slow, careful process. We lined up our holes to install our K-member bolts, and as we were lowering down the body onto the engine, we made sure we did not hit the oil dipstick tube or the transmission dipstick tube. We also had to make sure that we did not hit the steering gearbox, and we had to move the power steering pump hoses out of the way, and we had to remove the kickdown linkage bracket because it was going to hit the firewall. All right, Doug, let's jack up the car and get this engine dolly out from underneath. Here is another example of how we pay special attention to detail. The torsion bar seal on the left is all one piece like the original, and it has the old DeSoto Chrysler Plymouth stamp on it with the original part number. And the one on the right is a cheaper aftermarket reproduction, which is a 2-piece unit. and it has some generic numbers stamped on it. So we will definitely be using the one on the left. It's kind of tough to get on, but if you wet it with Windex, it'll slide on. You want to be careful not to rip them, because they will rip if you try to do it dry. There we go. All right. So when installing your torsion bars, it's important to note that there is a left and a right. At the end of each torsion bar, there are some part numbers and a L and an R distinguishing left from right. We're sliding this torsion bar in here,
Socket.
and you have to adjust the hex head by twisting this little finger here so it slides in. There we go. This is the torsion bar that you could control ride height with by adjusting an adjuster that we're going to put here in the lower control arm. So these are the original adjusters for the lower control arms. They were sent out and they were stripped and replated clear zinc like they were from the factory. It's a good idea to put just a little bit of anti-seize on the threads, because these threads are under a constant load as you're adjusting the torsion bars. So at this point, we'll slide our block in here. It rests just like that. And then we'll take our greased up bolt, screw it into the block. Now this bolt is how you adjust your ride height and how much tension is on the lower control arms, which controls the type of ride you're going to have and how high the car will sit. And as you could see, now I can't move the control arm up anymore because I'm going against the force of the torsion bar. Okay. Now we are ready to put our wheel hub assembly on, and we will tighten up the torsion bars, and we'll be ready to put our front tires on. So the next step is to put on the front wheel hub assemblies. We already have them built up. All of the brake hardware was replaced. The backing plates were phosphate coated. The knuckles were detailed. It has a brand new lower ball joint, and of course all brand new fasteners and brake hose. And it also has a brand new drum with wheel studs, all new wheel bearings inside, and a new dust cap. So it will fit right up in here. You put the lower ball joint nut on. Now, this nut has to be torqued to 100 foot-pounds, and it's important that you torque it before you connect it to the upper, because you won't be able to get your tool in there. So we will let that hang. Torque wrench, Doug. There it is, 100 foot-pounds. You want to make sure that your castle nut lines up with the hole. Put your cotter pin in. Doug, grab me a set of side cutters. And bend your cotter pin. Cut off the excess. And you're ready to connect the top. Okay, so the top one is also a 7/8, and it is also 100 foot-pounds. It makes it real nice to build these up on a bench so you don't have to build them on a car. these hub assemblies. Many people don't know that Cosmoline is also available in a paint form. The factory dipped the upper control arms and the lower control arms in Cosmoline, and it resulted in runs on the part. And the Cosmoline was basically used to preserve the part from rusting because it was a bare metal piece. Now, Cosmoline is available in an aerosol can, and that's something that we used to use around here. And here's an example of Cosmoline that was sprayed from an aerosol can. It worked fine, but it's not very durable. You could take and scratch it right off. So there's a guy called Resto Rick, you could look him up online. He sells Cosmoline paint, which he developed himself. And as you could see, if applied correctly, you could simulate the runs that you would have if the part was actually dipped in Cosmoline, and it's durable because it's actually paint, so you can't scratch it off. So we decided to go with the Cosmoline paint just because it's more durable. So for our Charger, we are using the original style tire which came on this car from the factory. It's a bias ply tire, it's white wall, it's a 7.75 14-inch tire, and we're using original rims which were media blasted and powder coated the correct color. They were purchased from Coker Tire, and it is a bias ply tire, it's not a radial, so it's not going to ride as nice as a radial would, but we can't put radials on an OE type restoration because it wouldn't have the same appearance. You could see it has a type of a pie crust perimeter that goes around the whole tire, and a radial tire would just not satisfy the visual needs that we need for this type of restoration. All right. Gonna drop her down for the first time. Look at that. That is awesome.
Pretty high right now.
She's coming alive. So right now I'm just gonna take this caster off and get ready to put the rear end in and the leaf springs. This mounts right where the front leaf spring hanger mounts.
That's a threaded hole?
No. There we go. So this is the piece, the front leaf spring hanger, which bolts up in place where our caster was. Mount it right here. So we will mount this to our leaf spring before we set it up into place. So now that we have the front end down on the ground, we're going to work on installing the rear end under the car. And we're going to start by rolling the rear end under the car. Go ahead, Doug, grab that driver's side drum. We're going to spin this around. And we have the car high enough where we could just roll that right underneath. Yeah, you want to go on the other side and grab it? Got it? Push it back towards the door. There you go. Okay. Now we're going to get our leaf springs. Instead of buying reproduction leaf springs for the Charger, we decided to restore the originals because they were in really nice shape, and the reproduction ones are slightly different. So the original leaves have the first leaf, the top leaf, is round, but the remainder of the leaves are square. Now on the reproduction ones, all of these would be round. So once the car is assembled and somebody looks underneath the car, it's totally visible that those are not the original leaf springs and they are a reproduction. So these leaf springs were completely disassembled. They were media blasted. All of the clamps were replaced. All of the plastic shims in between each leaf was replaced. A new bushing was pressed in, and there's metal shims in between each leaf, which was replaced with a new centering pin, and the leaf springs were powder coated. So this will add a nice touch on the Charger when the judges are looking underneath the car on the show field. When you're installing leaf springs on your vehicle, it's important to know that you can't tighten the center pivot bolt on your front spring hanger until you have a load on a vehicle. Because when there's no load on a vehicle, your springs hang down, which would be in this position. And then when you put a load on a vehicle, it's going to pick the spring up and it's going to twist this leaf spring in this hanger. And if you have this hanger tightened, if you have this center bolt tightened, then the hanger is squeezing this center sleeve in your bushing. And when you put a load on a vehicle, you're taking a risk of damaging the inner rubber bushing. So it's important not to tighten this bolt until there is a load on the rear end of the car. So basically now we're just going to pick the leaf spring up and feed it into the mounting area and put the 4 bolts on from behind. And if you notice, the front spring hanger is bare metal, like it should be from the factory. It's not painted. It is coated to prevent it from rusting, but it does appear that it is bare metal. All right, go ahead and lift it back up. Let me slide in there.
Shackles are back here.
All right, here, I'll hold this. Grab the shackles. So Doug's installing new bushings into the leaf spring and the frame of the car. There you go. Come on, bad dog. Get it in there. So now that the rear end is in place under the car and we have our leaf spring installed, Doug and I are going to lift the car up, which is going to raise the leaf spring up, and that will raise the centering pin into this perch in the rear end housing. Once we get that set in place, we will put the U-bolts on and the shock plate, tighten it down, and the rear end will be installed. So these shock mounting plates are also bare metal appearing, just like they were from the factory, but they are coated so they do not rust. So we have our rear end installed, and Doug and I are going to pick the car up so we can pull the orange cart out that the rear end was sitting on. We're going to install the tires and lower the car down on the ground, and that's the first time it's going to be on the ground since a very, very, very long time. Let's tighten through this. Well, Doug, we had a productive day.
We did. And just like I said last time, I got a shirt out of them.
Actually got 2.
That's right.
But anyways, we installed the complete drivetrain, the rear end, the Charger is sitting on all 4 wheels once again, and we will continue on to installing the firewall components and the dashboard on the next segments. If you're interested in seeing any pictures of my prior restorations, please visit my website, www.chargerauto.com. www.afterhoursrestorations.com.